All right, so this is Ryan O'Melveny Wilson, CEO of Lawry's, who owns the Tam O Shanter, and we are actually sitting at Walt Disney's favorite table here in the, I would call it the main dining room.
That is correct. You're in the main dining room here at the Tam.
Of Tam. And Walt Disney, let's get into that first. He was a regular, and he's actually really ingrained in the culture of Tam O Shanter. Where did that come from?
Absolutely. So Walt was coming here regularly when the studios were across the 5 freeway. Him and his brother Roy would come over often. And certainly some of the inspiration of the Tam opening in 1922 was all of the great theatrics of Disney at that time, right? All the production. And the gentleman who was the original architect, I'm forgetting his name, but it'll come to me.
Harry Oliver.
Harry Oliver, thank you.
Yes.
Harry Oliver also worked on set designs for Disney. And this was pre-Disneyland, right? They were just making cartoons and starting to get into the movie business at that point. But this restaurant originally was just a commissary for our bakery business. So it was a casual coffee shop. It was a place people could come to and have a good burger and a cup of coffee for 5 cents.
Yeah.
And the potato chips that really started the overall business back in 1915.
That's awesome. Wait, tell me about that.
Okay. So the real business started in 1915 with what was called the Saratoga Chip. And
the Vandercamp story,
so
that's
the
right.
original Vandercamp story. So
okay.
The Franks and the Vandercamps came together and opened up this potato chip stand selling Saratoga chips. And it was thought of as being a health food because it only had 3 ingredients, right? It was potato, salt, and the oil.
Potatoes and vegetable, right? Okay.
And they sold it out of a storefront on Spring Street in downtown LA. And quickly started to expand the menu into cookies and other baked goods, and that became Vandercamp.
Yeah.
And that was the primary business of Lawrence Frank, my great-grandfather, the namesake of Lawry's. Along the way, he opened
Lawry's from Lawrence, like
Lawry's
Larry.
from Lawrence. So originally they were going to call Lawry's the Prime Rib, Larry's Prime Rib. And a friend, or actually may have been one of his Vandercamp cousins, said, "Oh no, take one of the R's out and replace it with a W. It sounds more regal, right?" And it should be Lawry's.
Yeah.
And there was the lore is that there was a radio announcer in the 60s that mispronounced it on air and pronounced it as a Lawry's.
Yeah.
Where in reality it should be Lawry's.
Wow. Okay. Didn't know that. So going back.
Anyways, so potato chips, Vandercamp Bakery in 1922. My great grandfather and the Vandercamps opened up the Tam O Shanter here on what was then Tropicana Boulevard, and they wanted to have a local restaurant. The bakery was just down the road on Fletcher Drive and the 2 freeway right now. And they loved the location. They wanted to have a place to host people. They wanted a place to just come and have some lunch and breakfast, dinner for that matter. And then they loved the combination of all the design and creativity of not only building the space, but coming up with the name and coming up with the menus. You look back to those old original menus and they were tons of flourish and all sorts of creativity.
Yeah, I mean, and you can tell.
Still right to this day.
So so tell me where the name comes from.
So the original name was actually Montgomery's Country Inn.
So funny. Okay.
And I don't know who Montgomery was. I don't know why it was a country inn. We weren't even a hotel, so why they held on to inn, I don't know.
Okay.
And my understanding is in the short period of time, at most a couple of years, they changed to the Tam O Shanter after the Bobby Burns, epic poem, the Tam O Shanter Cap. But they held on to the inn as well. They kept on wanting to call it a Montgomery or Tam O Shanter Inn. And so it was the Tam O Shanter Inn from probably the mid-20s until I want to say mid-70s.
Okay.
When it changed into the Great Scott. And the Great Scott was a attempt by my grandfather to take this business a little more upmarket, right? Wanted to change the name and make it a little bit more of a fine dining restaurant.
Yeah.
Eventually, they had 3 Great Scotts around Southern California. 2 closed and just came back to the original. And then by, I think, the late 80s, they realized we got to go back to the original name, back to the Tam O Shanter.
Yeah, the history, right.
And then in 2012, roughly, we did another rebranding of it and went back to our original graphics and dropped the inn to clarify that you can't come in and get a room here.
Yeah, right.
I mean, we were
I'm done with my meal, but I need to stay here for the night.
Regularly, people would coming into the front desk with bags and asking for a hotel room. So, pretty wild.
Okay, that's a pretty good one.
So, the Tam has got an incredible legacy here in what's now Atwater Village. And at that time, when we originally opened, it was a dirt road kind of connecting Pasadena to Hollywood.
So crazy.
And my great-grandfather made a good real estate decision, and we've weathered some changes in the neighborhood for sure, but the Tam's always been here, and that's ultimately one of the things we're really proud of, is a restaurant really serving the community, right? I think today restaurants try to it's not that dynamic, right? Restaurants are flash into a community, they take advantage of a cheap lease opportunity, but they're not really there committed to the people and to the coworkers, and the Tam's been here through the ages, and we're really proud of where it is today.
Do you think that the legacy of the Tam O Shanter is such that that's what sort of keeps the flame burning bright? Or what do you attribute that to?
Well, I mean, we're celebrating 100 years old this year, right?
It's a big deal,
and
especially in LA terms. That's a huge deal, yeah.
And in restaurant terms, and in family business terms, you start compounding that, and we really become a unicorn out there. I think wonderfully for our company, we've celebrated a lot of milestones. 85 years in Beverly Hills, 65 years in Five Grounds. And continuously, I don't want to celebrate an old restaurant. I want to celebrate a relevant restaurant. So
good point.
I think certainly the legacy and the generational experiences that people have celebrated here, whether they're significant or just a Tuesday night with friends, right?
Yeah.
It's that continuity in an otherwise very kind of chaotic world that I think is the legacy we want to hold on to.
Right.
And over the last 10 years, this restaurant has really been focusing on just great operations. We've added more programs. We've added our whole whiskey program. We've redone our whole bar program.
I was going to ask about the whiskey. So that's a relatively new addition. Almost,
yeah, that's in the last.
Because it's renowned. It's renowned already. So I kind of feel like it was.
10 years ago, after the 90th anniversary, is when we really started to make investments in the brand and in the overall concept. And I think the whiskey program launched probably around 2014-15. And John Lindquist, our GM, has really taken it and run. And last I checked, we were at about 600 different whiskeys here.
Yeah.
We've got one of the best whiskey programs up and down the West Coast.
That's what I'm saying. It's legendary. And to be honest,
fantastic.
that's when I kind of came into my own. That's when I started exploring more culinarily, let's say. But by that point, the whiskey program already had that reputation. I was like, oh, Tam O Shanter is where you go to get like all these rare and like awesome whiskeys. Yeah.
And I think one of the wonderful things about the program, aside from all the unique rare whiskeys, is we've got 3 people that just love the product. And John, our GM, oversees the program. We got 2 other bartenders, one from Kentucky, one from Scotland, who just, they tell the stories.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the full complement, right? Like, people want to come in and understand the context of this whiskey and why it's created, and that's one of my early inspirations of getting into food as well. That I think people really want something deeper than just something in the glass or something on the plate. They want to know why, and we can do that with great
Story
stories.
sells.
John and Jimmy, and, yeah.
I mean, storytelling has become this thing, recently, again, in the last 10 years, probably helped by social media and things like that.
And I think also helped by the pandemic, right? People want something a little bit deeper when they're coming out to eat, right? I think oral histories are a little bit more important, right?
Yeah.
People want to have something more meaningful than just a simple plate of food and something in the glass.
Tell me about the food and talk about the menu. I mean, obviously, it's very Scottish heavy. Scottish is.
Yeah.
I saw I saw this term. It was in the LAist in the 2017 article. It said decidedly untrendy, which I can't disagree with. That doesn't mean it's bad, but that puts you guys in an interesting position,
sure.
right? Because you're sort of pigeonholed. It's like, Scottish pub. So how do you, or Scottish do you explore? Yeah, how do you just?
I think it's so. There's multiple different kind of foundations or anchors on the menu, right? There's our own legacy, right, which is a 100-year-old now plus food business, whether it's the Lawry's foods and all the spices, etc. It's the other restaurants we have, which is kind of the underpinning of all the prime rib we sell. And then it's just the natural history of this restaurant and the recipes.
Yeah.
Our Scotch rarebit isn't a traditional rarebit at all. It's kind of a Scotch-ish queso dip, right? I mean, it's fantastic though, right?
Right, right.
It's being true to all of those different components of our legacy, but also just the Tam and a natural evolution of a menu. So, I was the executive chef here in 2009 and was responsible for kind of starting some of the repositioning of the menu.
Wow.
And
that's a fine balance for you.
I was a young chef at that time, and I made some mistakes, and ultimately you have to just be adding new things to the menu and then let the guest move with you. So you got to keep the old guard there, and then you start moving it forward, and it takes years.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about people that come once a month, a couple times a year. They want to still experience that continuity that they had last visit, or a visit 10 years ago with their grandmother, or whatever that emotional connection is, right?
Totally.
You need to really honor that, but then add new things and continue to give people new ways to experience the brand without jeopardizing why they came, why they made that reservation, what their favorite thing was. So
that's awesome.
It's an interesting evolution, and today, I think we're really focused on just delicious, honest food, good value, consistency, good quality. But no, I don't want to be out there doing the newest, trendiest thing.
No,
So,
and that's what I'm saying. So decide that phrase from the LAist, it was almost a compliment to the brand, to the legacy, and it does put you in this position where you're like, well, we can't be intractable and not move towards the future, but at the same time, you need to respect the fact that your history is a large part of what makes this such like an outstanding like LA icon.
And I think it's also an interesting way to talk about relevance, right? I mean, what is relevance in this modern day, particularly in a community like LA where you can go find anything you want? And again, I don't think we're going to be competitive if we're trying to be the hippest, trendiest restaurant. That's not why people come here. They want to have something a little bit more nurturing, a little bit more nostalgic, and something that's just going to really, satisfy that deeper need than I'm going to be going to the hippest, coolest new pizza place, Thai place, whatever, whatever's on trend, right? So in some ways, we're kind of the counterpoint to that, but it's still got to be great. It's still got to be great hospitality. It's got to be a cold beer. It's got to be a nice burger cooked the way you want. Your prime rib's going to be delicious.
And just
tender,
a good vibe, man. Just the lighting, the layout. I mean, so unique. I mean,
you can't replicate this.
What are some of your favorite aspects of the? Do you call it the Tam?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
okay. What are your some?
And that's casual within my family. We call it.
Okay. Okay. Good. So, what are some of your favorite aspects of the Tam?
Wow. I mean, I spent so many years in our kitchen, so I've got a lot of fondness for the kitchen. It's a challenging kitchen to work in because it's kind of spread out and it's old, right? I mean, it's a 100-year-old kitchen, but it's great. We've done a lot of work to it. Out in the dining rooms, I think the bar is really special because that's the original structure, right? Over the bar is the original turret, and there's an old Tam O Shanter up there, and that's something just you don't find restaurants built that way.
That's super cool, yeah.
And if you look in the older dining spaces, there's some incredible old relics and all of which is authentic. My grandparents, particularly in the 50s and 60s, went to England a lot, and they would just go buy estates sight unseen. And so everything that's up here, my aunt has largely curated and kept track of and takes care of, and it's an amazing legacy. The other one I want to mention is the patio, right? The patio we opened in 2018. Pre-pandemic. That was a project that I nurtured for about 5 years to get through the city. I stepped aside from the company. I didn't leave entirely, but went back to business school for a year. And my aunt and uncle picked it up and got it across the finish line. But truth be told, that was a project that was 30 years in the making. That my grandfather tried a couple times and just kept on butting up into issues with the city and different sorts of requirements, etc. And we kept at it and opened the patio, certainly not knowing what was in front of us in another couple of years, but thank goodness we did.
It ended up being fortuitous.
It's fortuitous because people want to dine outside in LA, although they're incredibly fickle of when, right? There's about a 6-degree temperature span where people eat outside. It's like 72 to 78.
That's my wife.
Either side of it,
I'm guilty.
Forget it.
Yeah,
forget it.
Right.
But regardless, it's been an incredible billboard for the restaurant. People are recognizing it when they're driving up and down Los Feliz, and it's been a great opportunity to bring in a younger demographic and a different diner, and now coming through the pandemic, it's been a real saving grace that people can go out and have a great tan experience outside. So
your family is legit LA royalty. I mean, like at least culinary royalty, from the Vandercamp to Frank to Lawry's.
Yep.
Wait, what did you say is the
Lawrys.
proper Lawry's because of Lawrence,
Lawrence,
right? Okay,
Lawry's.
Lawry's, the Tam. I mean, that's a lot to have under your umbrella. I mean, that's a lot of juice.
You missed, and it's not open anymore, but the California Center. I don't know if you've come across it in your research,
Yeah.
but that was the old bottling plant that was my grandfather's office that they created this great hospitality experience.
No
And,
kidding, yeah.
I mean, hundreds of thousands of people would come through there every year, and the gardens are still there. You think back to those days and what they had an opportunity to open and create and run. I mean, it's incredible what they can do back then. So,
And now what's
amazing.
funny is a lot of these, because I actually did a piece that hasn't run as of yet on the Vandercamp's old building,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, that's friggin' iconic as well. Like,
Yeah.
just the look, and Lawry's, everybody knows all your buildings, the food, the reputation. What's that like for you to be sort of the mastermind?
Well, I mean, I'm not the mastermind. I'm now the fourth generation steward of what to do
Steward,
next,
fair,
right?
fair,
and I think, you got to honor the traditions. You got to honor what. Ultimately, my grandfather was the guy who took the spice business and did a lot with it and created that whole line of products and was instrumental in a lot of the art and graphics, etc., for our restaurants. And yeah, you got to always be really humble to what he did and what my uncle did and past generations. But I continue to think you got to keep it moving forward. I'm not going to rest on our heels, and we got to be thinking about new businesses and new opportunities while we still really pay respect to the existing ones, because they're a fundamental business to LA, and while LA is getting increasingly difficult to run a business in, they're still great brands and people love them. So
Right.
yeah.
Do you have any forward-looking thoughts about Tam in particular, and then more so the greater business?
Sure. I mean, I think the TAM, frankly, is still working through post-COVID operations.
Everybody
You
is,
read about the
frankly.
labor challenges, and
Yes.
they are potent and powerful here. So we're still going to have a pretty tight menu.
Yeah.
The Ale and Sandwich Bar, the great lunchtime and dinner kind of bar concept, we're working to restaff, but we just don't have the labor to do it quite yet. So in light of some of the restrictions, tightness over the food labor, we're looking at other beverage opportunities and expansion. So continuing to do some great whiskey-oriented events. We're looking to continue to grow our speakeasy business.
Tell me
maybe
about that.
even,
Tell me about that.
well, you're gonna have to, yeah. Well,
I know we
I'm gonna
can't talk
jeopardize
about
the
it.
whole-
Oh, right.
This is the whole Fight Club conversation, right? Speakeasy is running, and I'll have to confirm the date, but it's I think the third Friday of every month.
What a
And
cool idea.
Jake LaRue runs a great little speakeasy concept out of the guards room, and we bring people through the back door. We got some live music, 3 seatings,
So perfect.
heavy cocktail
Yeah.
focus, and it's great. We turn the lights down, it gets all moody back there, and people don't even know where they are. It's wonderful. It's what they, speakeasy truly should be, and they do it really well. So we're looking at how to continue to solidify that without jeopardizing its exclusive, cool nature.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned the car hop, right?
And then the car hop, this is a new idea we're looking at for August, September to give it a shot, and it'd be right now we're thinking a Sunday afternoon where we do car service on a limited menu, mostly just kind of burgers and things. And
Or go back to your Frankfurters and chips
right?
idea.
Some good sausage
That's,
and have a grill out there and some chips, and
That's a fantastic
bring in some
idea.
local car clubs. We're talking to the Derby Dolls, one of the roller derby clubs,
Yeah.
and have some fun in the parking lot. Ultimately, we've got a big space and seeing what else we can do. So, the TAM I think is looking at a little bit of diversity in our revenue opportunities. You got to expand it a little bit, but the TAM is so authentic and so true to its core. I don't
Yeah.
want to be doing too much to it, right? We'll never see another Tam O Shanter. You have to keep all these new ideas very consistent with the TAM. So.
Man, you close that out well. I was going to literally ask you, do you feel the gravitas of running, the longest continually single-family owned, operated restaurant in Los Angeles? Is that a pressure?
That's a great question, but ultimately, no, because I think the TAM, I spent a lot of time with the TAM, and the TAM has such a strong foundation, and people love the TAM, and its identity is really true. And when we did the repositioning 10 years ago almost now, it was so evident that there was so much richness that we just had to uncover. So it's really about going back and telling all those stories. So retell the car hop, right? Get back to some of our our origins and just bring those ideas forward. So, I mean, the whiskey program, we used to have, I think it was in the late 30s, 40s, there was a piece of furniture that was called the Great Wall of Scotch. And it was just my great-grandfather having some fun, or Harry Oliver, I don't know who it was, Harry Vandercamp, having some fun with a piece of furniture and put a sign over it. And it was like, wait a second, no, we need to have a big Scotch program. We're going to build out the Great Wall of Scotch, right?
Awesome.
And so that was the inspiration for our, the red bureau up there that has a lot of whiskey in it. So
one last thing. I know you're on a time crunch.
No,
I
you're good.
appreciate
You got me for a while.
What do you so you mentioned the neighborhood has gone through some changes, which I know. I mean, and now it's on the upswing. But during that era where it was a little tougher, was the Tam suffering? What was going on during that?
Tam's been through all sorts of iterations of business and success, and I mean, it's like any business, you go through its cycles. And I came in 2009 and had a big task of continuing to move this business forward. We had to get more people in, and it was, our revenues were struggling, and again, it was about focusing on the quality of the operation, quality of the execution, and as the chef, I was really focused on food, so it was improving the consistency from Monday to Sunday, right? And so that was kind of the fundamental opportunity.
How did you go from chef to CEO?
I like to believe it was a natural progression.
I don't think that's a terribly common career progression.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I came to the company as a very good cook in 2008, and then I had a hand in a couple of our international openings. I opened the restaurant in Shanghai and in Osaka, and that was really more of a leadership opportunity than cooking. And I think the big jump from being a cook to a chef is you're no longer hands in the food, you're really leading the team. So that was a big leadership move. And as I would come in and support executive chefs, and then I would work with them on repositioning the kitchens, and then I'd have to step in as a general manager or an executive chef for a period of time. I eventually just made my way up to being kind of a director of operations, so multiple restaurants would answer to me. Yeah. And then my grandfather put me on our board, and then it was just a natural progression.
Did you always want it? Did you envision that?
Yes and no. I mean, I have a natural gravity towards leadership opportunities. And so that was what always kind of guided me. No one ever said you will be X.
Right.
And then in 2016, at my wife's encouragement, went back to business school. So in 6 weeks, took the GMAT, applied to a bunch of schools, got into a good one, and took a step aside from 2017 and 18 to go back to business school. And then came back in 2018 as the Chief Marketing and Strategy Officer. Yeah. And that was a kind of transitional role with my uncle, who was our CEO at the time, and then came into the CEO role in July of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, and I'm still figuring it out.
That's when you started the role, huh?
It was supposed to be April and ended up postponing by 3 months, and we're still figuring out.
You know what? If you start and you push through that, then it's all clear, blue skies. Well, not blue sky, but can't get much tougher than that.
I agree.
That's crazy. So tell me, and I don't want to get too much into Lawry's, but that obviously has a very significant place in Los Angeles. And I'm going to end up doing that in a minute on Lawry's too. So I'm kind of cheating, stacking the deck here for myself. But talk about that restaurant and legacy for a while, if you don't mind.
So that restaurant opened in 1938.
Yeah.
I think it was a similar inspiration to this restaurant. Excuse me. Lawrence wanted to have a single entree restaurant, and he loved prime rib. He loved to host his family on Sunday afternoons. What he thought was the greatest meal in America, right? And he would bring people together to show off his culinary abilities. It was an opportunity for him to tinker with what has become Lawry seasoned salt. Right? He developed that in his garage to season the prime rib. And he found the location on La Cienega, bought it. I don't know what he originally paid for that land, but wow, that was inevitably a good investment. And opened, he always wanted a single entree restaurant. And all of his friends in the food business said, "You're crazy.
Sounds nuts.
You're nuts, right? Like, what are you talking about?" And so he listened to them. And in the initial menu had prime rib for sure, but then had lamb chops and broiled pineapple and like all sorts of things on the menu. And supposedly within about 6 months, he said, "Nope, you guys were wrong. I'm going back to my idea."
Yeah.
And it was
Conviction.
true. You know, it was very much a single entree restaurant for many, many years, 30, 40 years, until the 80s roughly. We started adding seafood on. My uncle will tell the story. He came to the company in 1982, and his first contribution or big change was he brought sour cream to the baked potato. And that was a big kerfuffle, right? Because people kept bringing sour cream in on their own to put in their baked potato.
Right.
He said, "Can we please just stop
Carry it,
sour cream?"
yeah.
And at that point, Lawrence had passed, and we had a second location in Chicago, and I think we were a little bit more ready for change.
Yeah.
But that's an indication of how true we are to some of those original inspirations, and really just focusing on that great, concept at its core. So over the years, we look at the menu today, and it still is a pretty limited menu. And yet in 2018, we made a whole nother, investment in the brand and the menu, and we've expanded it significantly. But you look at it stacked up against our other premium meat concepts, and we're still a limited menu, but it's much more than it was in the past. So, and I think about that evolution of the menu, and while that's changed, I think again, so much of why Lawry's is popular is because of its continuity. Because of the nostalgic connection with generations past.
Same. That's why it's so amazing what you guys are doing with these brands, because there's so many places that are institutions, and then 20 years later they're gone. You know what I mean? Or I live in Studio City, and there's a place called Black Market Liquor Bar, which has been there for like 12 years, and it's for that type of institution in that area,
sure,
that's forever. Yeah. You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh shoot, people are still going there, it's still crowded. Like, and we're talking 12, 15 years, you know what I mean? So to be pushed 100 here, and what do you say, so 80, 84?
88, I think in 88
Ooh.
in Beverly Hills.
Ooh.
60 plus down to the 5 corners.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Our restaurant in Las Vegas, Lawrys Prime Rib in Las Vegas, is celebrating 25 years this year. And early on this year, our GM came onto a call and was like, "Okay, I want to talk about the 25-year anniversary." And we were all kind of like, 25 years? And had to do the calculation. Like, yeah, you guys are 25 years old. Sorry, we're focused on the 100-year-old restaurant.
And in Vegas, too, it's another one where there's turnover like nobody's business. Come on, I mean.
Find another restaurant.
Because Vegas has evolved so fast in such a short period of time.
I mean, just look at the movement up and down the strip, right? I mean, where are the food epicenters up and down the strip? That moves every 3 to 5 years.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
And so we're off the strip. We've got a lovely location,
which is actually
one of the things.
Which actually smart.
Why it's been successful, because it's a bit of a destination. Locals can come there. You don't have to mess around with the strip.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, truly last question.
No, you can keep going.
Where do you see the TAM in 10 years and another 100 years?
Oh, wow. 10 years, I think the TAM's going to be similar to where it is today, and maybe even a little bit more beverage focused. I think that's going to be the natural evolution of restaurants in general, and particularly in this price point. 100 years? Wow. That's
put you on the spot of that one,
right?
That's a
long ways away. I hope it still is despite what I just said, I want it to always be a popular restaurant. And by that, I mean not busy popular, but popular and accessible, right? That everyone feels as though they've got a place at the TAM, whether it's families, whether it's young people coming in and having a PBR at the bar, or a couple coming in and celebrating their 80th anniversary, right? 80th birthdays. So I think that accessibility piece to all of our restaurants is really important. We want them to be popular and true for all.
I wonder if it's this whole kind of like storybook motif that it truly is timeless, because it's kind of like a fantasy environment. And to your point, you could come here with your boys. You could come here on a date with your wife. You know what I mean? Family, son, grandma, like, doesn't matter. And that's,
you look around the space and you're automatically creating more memories just by the ambiance and by your own imagination wandering. And I wonder what this place looked like, 50 years ago when we were here. And if it was 50 years ago, there was a counter seating here, and it was much more of a burger place. And there was, at one point there was a griddle in the middle of the bar. I mean, it's pretty wild when you look back at the old pictures that are all over the walls. So
interesting. Any major, not major, but renovation type changes inside coming? Yeah.
Nothing in plans right now. We need to address both bars. This one I want to really revamp and redo kind of the orientation between the main here and the guards.
Yeah.
But part of that depends on, in some ways what Jake wants to do, can do with the speakeasy concept. But there's an opportunity to improve not only the functionality of that bar, but just the ambiance and how it engages in the room. And then the front bar needs a whole overhaul. So
why do you say that?
Because it's an old bar, right? I mean, it's I don't want to lose the skeleton, but
I was gonna say
a successful renovation there is people don't know it's new, right?
Okay.
I want it to be something of a facade-ectomy, right? An architectural term where we leave all the.
Wait, is that really a term?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Where you basically leave the facade, but then you remove everything else. So
that's good.
That needs to happen, but I don't think the TAM is looking for those big conceptual changes. It's not what people want. Much like the patio, right? We just added a different experience and kept everything true to its core.
And there's still continuity. Like that's what kind of sort of blew my mind.
Here,
I was like, was that new last time I was here? Like it looks like it's been there a while, but I'm like, is that new because of pandemic? Like that's what. So that's very, very well.
And the same thing about a bar back here, right? I want it to look and feel like an old bar. We just need to rebuild it, redo it, refurbish it. So.
That's awesome. Would you mind taking me on a tour?
Absolutely. So this is the BPC. This room is actually part of the office building next door to the restaurant. So when you're outside, this is actually into the office building, and that's relevant because we used to own the office building, and that was the offices for Lawry's Foods after we closed the bottling plant. So at that point, my grandfather and uncle's offices were upstairs. What's now the beer cooler was our test kitchen, and we needed to expand the restaurant, so we were able to convert some office space into the Bonnie Prince Charlie room.
What year was that?
That was in the mid-70s, I want to say.
I was going to say, because this room has a feel too, that it's not exactly
No, it's not very
new structure. Yeah. It looks.
So this is the BPC. Mostly, it's open regularly, but we really use it for private dining and kind of tour business. And then what we call the main, great space.
So awesome.
Walt's table, great fireplace, just a structure. And then all sorts of memorabilia up above with urns. So guards room, again, overflow rooms where we'll use it. Hi guys, for the speakeasy.
That's cool, man.
Is
the speakeasy open yet? Is it around? Have you guys done the
event in the last few years? But when you start looking closely, and there's some funny, fingers here that.
That's cool. It's neat.
And if you look, I don't know where it is. There's some male anatomy carved into the ceiling. I forget where it is. So kitchen, we won't do the full tour.
It's a nice look, yeah.
And I think this is, forgive the mess, we're cleaning up some
Of course, come on.
This is particularly interesting because back in the 50s, 60s, there used to be a counter here. And so you think back to the old days of diner service. There's a counter here, and you could just get your eggs and burgers and waffles.
Oh, like a walk up, oh wow.
So you can see, look at the structure here, right? There used to be, the line used to always be there, but this used to be a seated counter with stools, and people just used to walk right down here.
That's hilarious and awesome, yeah.
Right?
Dang.
And so we've done a bunch of renovations and really contemporary kitchen.
Which is tough to take something that old and make it new and still maintain the integrity.
And then the Ellen Sandwich Bar. And this was a concept my grandfather really championed. And he had a couple of these. He had, this one obviously was the first one, and then he had a bar downtown called Casey's Bar, which is still there.
Okay.
And they had an Ellen Sandwich Bar there, and he just wanted to take that Lawry's tableside carving experience into something that was a little more accessible for lunchtime.
Yeah.
We're still trying to find carvers to come in and run the station. One gentleman who's here, Chickies, he's one of our carvers. He's going on 30 years with us.
It's good to have that loyalty.
But yeah, the Elm Sandwich Bar is great. So I don't know if you went to the concept pre-pandemic, but you come up, queue up, and they carve your sandwich right here, choice of breads, and then there's a little salad bar with beets and horseradish mustard, coleslaw, our peanut coleslaw.
The hand ground horseradish?
Oh yeah. And then the bar, Ricky here's bartender's 40 plus years. Ricky, how long have you been with us? 40? What's that, 44?
Wow. Congrats. Congratulations, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the original bar, and this is the original structure of the Tam. It's some of the last pieces that are left.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It is cool.
You can't build bars like this.
I was going to say, you better be careful when you do the facade-ectomy.
Yeah, but it's really about keeping all this structure and then new undercounter and new guts, which gets to be more expensive. But again, I don't want people to come in and not notice anything new other than their beer's a little colder, right?
Fair.
So, yeah.
Fair.
And we've, with our whiskey program, we've added in our Scotch Explorers. We're going to get back to that program. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but people can come in and go through a kind of a whole
Flight, if you will.
Yeah, but it's multi-day. You're number 2 on that list? Fantastic.
I tried for 1, but somebody beat me to it.
Oh, yeah. We'll get it back up and running.
So what do you need to do on this?
Yeah, you got to go through a whole kind of around the world of different whiskeys. And I forget how much you have to spend, but it's a few $100 to be able to get there.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's fun. It's great.
Show me the patio. Show me the
Well, let's get started.
Okay.
All right, so then this is all the front entryway, and then 2014 roughly made all these renovations, put in the wall whiskey, and then we did the snug, and this used to just be kind of a seating area, waiting area for people when they're waiting for their reservations, but now it's an opportunity for people to come in and really see our
It's really smart.
history.
This is really smart.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It was one of those moments where we were aghast at the cost of doing something with quality, but now we look at it and it's such a wonderful moment for people to come in and really.
And now you don't need to tell the story. They could just look at the story and read it themselves. This is beautiful.
There's Walt and Lawrence and Harry Oliver and some fun pieces of our uniforms through the years.
Do you have the there's supposedly something that Walt illustrated with
There are a couple what we've done with them. Diane, we're the Disney. You're the old.
Oh, you gotta be kidding.
So that was Lawrence, and that's my uncle and my grandfather. And actually on Monday, Disney's going to be making a presentation for 100th. And I don't know what it is, but.
And these are actually illustrated by.
I mean, I don't think they were by Walt, but. I mean, this one's Walt Disney and staff.
That's awesome. That
But
is incredible.
I mean, that was 1958, so
Wow.
pretty cool.
Unbelievable. Is up this year, LA in a minute, and I'm here in Atwater Village at the Tam O Shanter, which is the longest continuously running same family owned restaurant in Los Angeles, 100 years old. And if you think this thing looks like it's something out of a storybook, well, you're right. It was designed by some of the brightest talent in Hollywood 100 years ago, and in the century since, it's been a watering hole for some of the biggest names, such as Walt Disney and John Wayne. Let's get into the history. So the Tam O Shanter was originally established in 1922 by Lawrence Frank, Walter Vandercamp, and Joe Montgomery, not pictured. Vandercamp was a namesake of the famous Vandercamp Dutch bakeries, which served their famous Saratoga potato chips and other baked goods. The business opened in 1922 as Montgomery's Country Inn after Joe Montgomery, and it was simply a roadside diner and inn on the dusty dirt road of Los Feliz Boulevard across from the then-named Tropico Bridge. In 1924, it was renamed the Montgomery's Chanticleer Inn, aka California's quaintest eating house. Montgomery's Chanticleer Inn, with its quaint tower and small store, sold pretzels, those Saratoga potato chips, and the odd mixture of Navajo, Chinese, and Italian curios. When Montgomery's Chanticleer Inn failed to thrive, somebody from the Rotary Club suggested the restaurant adopt a Scottish theme and rename it the Tam O Shanter, which they did in 1925. There was an aggressive roadside advertising campaign for the newly christened Tam O Shanter Inn, the home of ham and hamburger and malted milk for 15 cents. That ad campaign, as well as the launch of one of the country's first drive-ins or car hops, enabled guests to eat in their cars on a wooden tray and catapulted the Tam O Shanter to success. They launched their legendary ale and sandwich bar, which still remains today, and celebrities such as John Wayne would take advantage of the privacy of the large booths and the dark lighting inside the restaurant. Additionally, Walt Disney, who lived just blocks away, would favor the Tam O Shanter and came here with his animators and friends. Walt Disney was such a fan of the Tam O Shanter, he even has a plaque commemorating his favorite spot to sit right here in the main dining room. Check it out. Part of the appeal for Disney, Wayne, and others was instead of hiring an architect, they hired famed movie set designer Harry Oliver, who attempted to echo Hansel and Gretel's witch house with his design. In 1968, they remodeled and renamed the restaurant the Great Scott, but within 5 years, they changed the name back to the Tam O Shanter, and as explained by CEO Ryan O'Melveny Wilson, the great-grandson of Lawrence Frank, it's all about continuity and family.
The legacy and the generational experiences that people have celebrated here, whether they're significant or just a Tuesday night with friends, right? It's that continuity in an otherwise very kind of chaotic.
100 years later, the Tam O Shanter still feels like something out of a storybook, but the next chapter is yet to be written. Here's to the next 100 years. All right, LA, it's been a minute.